Hey everybody, Chris Armiger, Fort Myers Beach Fire. So my case study for this week, I did the Great Lakes storms of 1913. Um, some other names, White Winter or White Disaster, I think was the most popular one I found online when I researched beyond the book. Um, so just why I picked this one. This one was I think a very good case study, even though it's 100 years ago, about how you can have natural conditions that you don't really expect or don't really plan and anticipate for your geographical area and like historical patterns um, that you can you know predict or consider with a high level of probability. So essentially, like the quick rundown is they had a storm, a winter storm, 1913 over the Great Lakes, and it was very much like a hurricane as opposed to just a snowstorm. They had weather fronts, collide, and then they had drastic drops in temperatures very quickly, which created high seas out in the Great Lakes, and then they had all this inshore snow, heavy wind, and what happened was so very much like the hurricanes here in Florida. Um, there was a period of isolation where you had a dramatic or rather drastic amount of devastation, and you had that that 72-hour period. In this particular study, it was a little bit longer, but you had a period of time where you were had to fend for yourself. Like there was no supplies, no resources coming or going from anywhere, but especially coming to the places that needed the aid. And by resources, I mean I'm not talking about just like you know rebuilding supplies and stuff like that, but I'm talking like basic necessities: dairy, food, milk, water, um, fuels for generating heat, firewood, coal, stuff like that, like stuff just that you would have to deal with in a major snowstorm. There was a several ships that were sunk in the lakes. So as we walk through the case study, I'll just start with the first stage one of the disaster. It talks about how it's early on. One of I think the first day of the actual storm. It lasted, depending on where you read, 3 to 5 days. It seems to be like 5 days was the timeline that most people report for the storm. But that's kind of like so. The first day you had notification that there was something happening beyond just a base common storm. There was going to be some significant weather event. So they talk about as city manager, what are your plans, and what resources do you feel that you need at this point. So this would kind of like be if you fast forward to today and you compare it with hurricanes, it would be kind of like the tropical storm warning, storm watch, hurricane warning day. This would be like, hey, it hasn't hit yet, but it's going to hit, and we're starting to feel the effects of a storm coming. And in the next week, get ready for it. It's on the way. So what do you need? So this is 100 years ago, like I said. I'm not from the north. I don't have a lot of experience from the north, but I hear that it's cold, and I hear that being cold is awful. So I would, my expectation would be to communicate to people, hey, and again, like this is 100 years ago, so there's not like major highways and all that other stuff where people can just take off in a short amount of time and get to safety. So rather like evacuation. So I think for this one, resources that you need early on, people need to understand, and you have to communicate to them. They need to be prepared to shelter in place for a long time. We use the standard day 72 hours, 3 days, but we have access to a lot of stuff. Our homes are very well constructed, so maybe more appropriately for this time period, you would want to say maybe have enough stuff to last a week. It's take a lot longer to get to you. The effects are going to be a lot worse. So you're really going to have to fend for yourself for a while. In this scenario, firewood, non-perishable foods, water, and things that you would use to heat your home. And also medicine. Medicine is also another thing. I'm really captivated by the public health aspect of a lot of these case studies, um, especially these older ones where it's not so simple to get things or get to a hospital. So maintaining your own ability, for health and safety, I think it's just really interesting to me. So I like to read these studies and see what solutions and strategies people used to deal with that, especially a long time ago. Because ultimately, if we have something catastrophic or when we have something catastrophic, depending on how bad it is, we have such a reliance on technology today that when people have to fend for themselves, I think it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people. Stage two goes forward and it talks about the supply issues. A lot of stuff was run by railroad then, so people were stuck. One of the solutions they came up with was they were using sleds, like horse-drawn sleds, to get supplies around to the people that needed it, but it was a very slow process. So um, there were a lot of issues that came from that. Some public health, some safety issues, and certainly some fatalities were contributed to starvation and lack of resources. The communication plan. So at this point in the storm, a lot of the telephone lines were gone because of the high winds, blew down trees, blew down phone lines. So strategies for that, you know, in this era, it's low tech to begin with. But if you were to fast forward that to today, um, and say you lost internet access, so you'd have to rely on radio. But then the only way that works is if people have the ability to receive your message. So we do pretty good with weather radio, and I think people in Florida are pretty familiar with it. Um, so I think that would be a good strategy for us today. The big thing with this that I don't have a lot of experience with, I like reading about, is how to deal with the ships. So the ships in the lakes, when they see a storm coming, right, you want them to port, you want them to dock. And now we have a Coast Guard station here on the beach, and they usually go up the river. They go up the Caloosahatchee. Uh, I don't know how far. I think it's like 35 miles or something. They go upriver. And in another class I'm taking the same semester, we're talking about floods. Or I just read the chapter on floods. It's this guy, Dr. Reynolds' class. And something I never really considered or thought about in my mind was like, so how floods work in coastal places. So like here on the beach, for instance, is a great example. So you get storm surge during a hurricane, and you have a rise in sea level. All the salt water, all the sea level comes into the coast. And one of the issues with that is that so the rivers flow out. So we have Caloosahatchee that flows from Lake O, flows out to the down here into the Gulf. That's where we have the brackish water and the red tide and all that stuff you see on TV now. But either way, so you have all this coastal storm surge that comes in, the Gulf comes in, and there's such a volume of water and so much pressure and weight behind it, right? That those rivers like the Caloosahatchee can't flow out, so they back up, and that's why you have the rise in the rivers, and you have all that flooding that goes up the river. It's not so much that the Gulf is coming in; it's just that it's stopping the fresh water from going out. So that was very interesting to me. It's not really pertinent to the case study, but the issue of flooding was, and what to do with the ships. How do you determine where a safe port is? And that's something that, so when you do your planning, you have to um, you have to understand the way the water works in your environment. Um, so if you have these are lakes, it's a little bit different, but these lakes, they don't act in the Great Lakes, from what I understand, they don't act like a lake that you would think of, like on a cabin in Tennessee or Georgia. These are massive, massive lakes. I think Superior, I did a little bit of reading about the geography of the lakes. It's almost like 200 feet deep. So it's very much like, almost like an ocean. I mean, it has currents and tides, and in this case study alone, they were saying 40-foot waves. And one of the video I attached to this post was from a meteorologist, and I think in that video he mentions that there were points where they had waves up to like 60 to 90 feet. So it was kind of like the Bering Sea, the stuff that we see on the crab TV show, about those guys crabbing out in the Bering Sea. So either way, the biggest thing that I got from this is early warning, and then determining whether you can evacuate or shelter in place. And in this scenario, and kind of like the hurricanes, you always want to evacuate, but sometimes you just can't get the message out fast enough. So you have to be prepared to shelter in place. And when you do shelter in place, you really need to have all the resources that you can think of that are appropriate for your environment, your weather environment, your geographical location, all those sort of things. And you can't rely on resources to get to you immediately. So check out the video I added. It's real quick. It's like 2 minutes, but it tells a good story. And I'll look forward to watching everybody else's stuff. So long, guys. Thanks.